But what planners, and if you look at the discipline, what are they, planners in those days? There are people from geography and people from architecture and urban design. Those were the major, that's it. I think Simi Davoli calls it in a recent publication, parent disciplines. So people from parent disciplines were planning out the case. One of them was a guy called Van Lohuizen, and he has done research on the development of population in the west of the Netherlands, collecting in a very complex way, because the data were not available as they are available now. Urban patterns, urban development over a period of 50 years time, and he detected a kind of structure, a number of areas where population would grow much faster than elsewhere. And on the basis of that, he and others claimed that some kind of regional approach would be necessary to handle a lot of issues which are connected to that. The relationship between traffic and urbanization, the relationship between urbanization and landscape and open space, very sensitive issues in those days. What has been, I think, a major intervention in terms of map making, first is the frame on map, because every map is a frame. This map is literally a frame. This is already some kind of decision taken on for analytical reasons, but interwoven with planning perceptions about a relevant area for policy making, for plan making. So that's very important when you're dealing with maps. What is the frame people use? How are they shifting a frame over space? This is an analytical map, but explicitly developed for planning purposes and for political discussions. There wasn't a clear response to that. What planners have been asking is to give provinces, this is the middle layer of government, and then to give provinces a kind of planning authority, so they could correct municipalities in their decisions. That was considered very centralistic by the national government and the parliament. So those authorities, those powers were not given to the provinces. That changed over time, and now we're going to jump into history. 3 decades later, there was a planning agency active behind, after the Second World War, established during the occupation. That was the, how do you say that in Rijksdienst für Nationalplanung, something like that. Can you translate that for me, Alexander, in a nice way in English?
It's like a national planning service.
Yeah, but it's not. It's a very German-inspired term. It later turned into planning agency, which is less. It does name is less provocative than a Rijksdienst. It sounded too German. And there's Verena in the room as well. He's from Germany. So policy environment changes. There was a kind of realization that some kind of planning approaches on a higher scale would be needed, especially in the western part of the countries. For the same reasons as Van Lohuizen in 1924 was already pointing at. A government committee has been established to study what has been going on in what was going on in the Randstad in the 40s and 50s. This eventually led to a report in 1958, but before I come to the report, I want to show you a few images. This is a very recent image. I think I got it from you, Verena. This is an image made by the design consultancy MAST, who made a time series of the Netherlands, starting in 1850 and then going 50 years further. This, according to Master and the data, the land use data they have been using, was how the west of the Netherlands, this is part of a far bigger map of the Netherlands, how the west of the Netherlands looked like more or less in 1950. One of the proponents of a planning approach towards Randstad was a guy called Jack Thijssen, and he made a map of what the western part of the Netherlands could look like in a certain scenario. So this is the area was now called Randstad in 1950, and this was the Randstad how it could develop according to Jack Thijssen. And he and others called this image, it was part of 4 or 5 future scenarios of the Randstad. He called this the sea of houses. So this is a scenario, but it was, in my view, explicitly made to guide discussions in a certain direction. You can even say that this map was especially made because of its manipulative powers, because that's what this map is actually doing, is actually suggesting. You probably all know a bit about the history of the Randstad and the planning the Randstad. Planning doctrine, as Andreas Vanulli would call it in a book co-authored with Arne van der Valk, is based on this conceptual image, conceptual map of the Randstad, in a very abstract way, visualizing the major urban agglomerations, leaving much detail apart, and pointing at the necessity of keeping certain areas open between these agglomerations. And it's a map that I call a conceptual map. It's expressing some basic ideas. You often find maps like this in space planning, but this is a map about morphology. If you dive into the functional relation, then maps are often much more complicated. So this is a very simple map, but because its simplicity explicitly put in this governmental agreement. This is, I still call this a map. And why it's a map? Because what is on this map is related to a specific area, the Randstad, the Netherlands. It expresses a major idea of the Randstad approach that was proposed in the late 1950s of the Randstad forms a ring of cities, not a ring that's completely closed, but the makers of this report made it a bit simpler. A ring of cities. And because there's in the middle of this ring this open space, which they call a green heart. This is a pictorial metaphor. Green heart is a verbal metaphor. And for that reason, because it's a green heart, it should go outward direction. This is a very, I think, very strong visual image of a few interlinked core ideas about the Randstad. Eventually, in the same report, it has led to another type of map, and this is more a kind of blueprint map full of suggestions for operational decisions, locations of new towns, imaged by the squares. You can recognize the buffer zones and future extensions of cities. So this is a kind of master plan in a report which has more conceptual maps for the sake of discussion. A jump into history again. What I would like to show you now is ways to visualize fundamentally different spatial concepts compared with the previous one. These are images from the mid